When I was just getting started on watercolor, I was ready to be fully committed, so I spent a long time in the art store and pick out what I thought would be useful. I spent a bunch of money to get a bunch of materials. After a few months, however, I found out that I don't need at least half of those materials. Now, after a couple of years of painting watercolor, I think I'm ready to make some recommendations for the beginners. Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Materials are important. At the beginning of this year, I made a video on my materials and setup during that time. Even though I have some new materials now, the majority of the materials are the ones that I've been using for years. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. This video is not a comparison video. I am just going to share my experience with you. And what's important is that even though my recommendations are for the beginners, they are good materials that I use today as a professional artist. So it is not some cheap stuff that you will throw away as your skill progresses. So let's cut to the chase and talk about them. So number one, paper. So let's start with paper. Good papers make painting easy, especially when you want to do a lot of wet-on-wet techniques. The problem is that high quality papers are mostly more expensive, and when you are just getting started, getting expensive paper can add to your stress because you will likely produce unsuccessful paintings. Out of all the materials, papers are used up at the fastest rate. So I want to recommend to you some affordable, good quality paper that you will feel less painful if you mess it up. I also recommend smaller paper. It is more tricky to do a larger painting when you are just getting started. Smaller painting is easier for you to manage the overall picture and will force you not to focus on details too much. Here are some of the papers that I like. Mozart. This is a relatively new brand. The founders are a couple in the UK. This is a very affordable option for you to just play around and do some small sketches. The paper is quite thin, so if you are using a lot of water, it will buckle. To avoid it being buckled too much, my suggestion is not to paint too close to the edges of the paper, because what happens is the fiber of the paper expand when there's water. So if you leave some room on the edges, the buckle will be less crazy. That being said, there are ways to combat that, and also ways to flatten your painting afterwards. I can make a separate video on this if you want. Let me know down below. Anyways, while this is not a high-end paper, it can take water and paint quite well, and the color turns out nicely. I did a few small paintings with it and I'm quite happy with the result. The only size it carries is the letter size, which is 8.5 by 11. That is a good size for the beginner, and they only have cold press option, which is what I use anyways. So if you're looking for a small, cheap paper, this is a good option. Another option is Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro is a affordable option from Cheap Joe. If you are in the US, it's very easy to order. I use that a lot, especially when I'm painting value study. They are very nice paper to work from. Even though I usually paint my full color painting on better paper, I still try to use those paper to do some sketches as well. And they do wet on wet quite well as well. And it is in block, so it is glued on all four sides, so it's not going to buckle as much. It is a little bit more expensive than Mozart, but it's still a very good option. And lastly, Baohong Academy grade. Baohong is a Chinese brand watercolor paper. This is 100% cotton paper. The quality is great. I have done many paintings on it, including some commission works. I can say the quality is just as good as some named brands, such as Arches and Saunders. The only caveat is that this paper is not carried in most of the online art store. So if you live in US or Europe, the only place to get it is from AliExpress. I put the link down below so you can check them out. While it is more expensive than Mozart and Kilimanjaro, it is cheaper than more expensive brands such as against saunders and arches, but the quality is just as good for me. So if you do decide to get this, I suggest you to get cold press. The size is up to you since the largest they have on AliExpress is 15 by 10, which is a good size anyways. Since they are mostly shipped from China, it might take a while to get there, so keep that in mind. Number 2, brushes. We are in a wonderful time that the manufacturers came up with high quality and affordable synthetic brushes. I mentioned many times that I'm phasing out my animal hair brush and going to use only synthetic brushes. They are a lot cheaper and just as good in most cases. And if you choose to go with any of the paper I mentioned earlier, you only need 2 to 3 brushes to do a painting. So the first brush I recommend is Escoda Ultimo. This is a very good synthetic squirrel hairbrush. It feels just like a regular squirrel hairbrush. This is great for making big washes because it holds a lot of water. I recommend size 14 because it is good enough for you to make a bigger wash on a smaller paper, but it's not too big so that you won't get your painting too wet too easily. Another one is Escoda Versatile. This is a synthetic Kolinsky hairbrush. I use this mostly for more abstract shapes such as tree, foliage, and such. It holds a good amount of water and is very easy to use. I recommend size 14. You can paint bigger shape with this brush, but it can also allow you to paint some fine detail with it because again, it has a very nice fine point tip. Last one is Escoda Perla. This is a great brush for harder shapes such as building, cars, and other man-made structures. The hair on this brush is a little bit more snappy and rigid, but it has a very sharp point at the front, which is great for painting detail. I recommend size 12 because it allows you to paint some medium-sized shapes, yet the tip of this brush will enable you to paint some finest details. Notice that I didn't recommend any small brush, and the reason for that is because you want to train yourself with slight bigger brush to make different marks with it. You can paint a good painting just with these 3 brushes. If you have too many brushes, it can actually slow you down because you start to debate which size you should be using. Get used to a limited brush set, then expand your brush selections as you progress. Number 3, paint. When you're just starting, you only need 4 colors. When you're just getting started, you don't want a 24 color set. Instead of getting a cheap 24 color set, get 4 high quality tubes of paint. The colors I recommended are cobalt blue, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and neutral tint. They are the muted primaries that makes color mixing easy. I made a separate video on that already, so if you haven't watched that one, be sure to check that one out. It is a very important video. I will put the link down below. With just these 4 colors, you make color mixing simple for you. You will feel limited, but that's a good thing because it will be like playing a game with very simple rules. You can just learn the rules very quickly and start having fun. It will also be more affordable because you're only getting a few colors, and since they are high quality paints, you will be able to continue using them. When you are more experienced with color mixing, you can add more color on top of them. Some other affordable supplies are palette. You can use any palette you are comfortable with as long as they have good mixing area. I got a 13 well aluminum palette. It is cheap and quite good. Lighting. Lighting is very important. You want to have a nice bright lighting to lit up your painting evenly. And very importantly, you want a light that is 6000 Kelvin because it gives you this nice white daylight. If you paint with a typical warm tungsten light, you will not be able to judge your color accurately. The light I'm using right now is 5 LED desk lamp. This is my favorite light so far. You can get it from Amazon. The white one is slightly cheaper than the black. It is a little bit more expensive though. It goes up to about $74 or so. If you're not ready to invest in that, you can just go to a local hardware store like Home Depot, get a cheap clamp light socket and a 6000K LED light bulb. That should be a lot cheaper, especially if you're using the size of the papers that I recommended earlier. This should be enough for now. Okay, let's take a look at a small painting I did with the recommended materials in this video. Before we start though, if you like this video, please please give it a like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you will get notification from me when I have a live stream and a new video. Okay, let's get started. So this is a very simple painting. I choose a simple subject, which is another thing that I want you to know is that when you're just getting started, pick a simple subject. Now, you might see a lot of detail in this photo, but I will simplify this a lot. So I am using Mozart paper. So I'm not going to paint all the way to the edges, otherwise the paper will buckle too much. So I'm doing the drawing right now. The focus is going to be the three cars that's lining up there. They have very strong contrast. The left side is lit by the sun, and the back of the car, all three of them are in the shadow. So it sets up a very nice, strong shape. So the background buildings, I just use my Escoda Ultimo to make some big wash, get that big shape in. And then I switch to Versatile and my Perla to start to get a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more accurate shape. Still keeping it loose though, because I am trying to paint one single shape. So for this value study, I am only going to use neutral tint. And value study is very, very useful when it comes to figuring out the composition, the big shape, the lighting and such. It is also a very, very good way for you to get your brush wet, get some practice, learning about the consistency of mixture. And I suggest everybody to do it because when you're doing that, you don't need to worry about color because you only have one color to work with. So that's the very good thing, to take a lot of complication out from your painting just to focusing on the value. So you only need to worry about the value, shape, and the mixture. So after that first wash is dry, the first wash is the middle value, I am painting the dark value. So the back of the car, especially the bottom, the tree. So in the photo, the tree value and the background building values are actually quite similar, but I want to separate them a little bit just to get a little bit more depth out of it. So the background building, I keep it in the middle value, and the tree and the back of the car and the shadow, they are the dark value. So this is a very simple three value painting. The first value, the light value, is the white of the paper, and the middle value is our first wash, which is quite moist, quite watery, and the third value, which is the one I'm painting right now, the dark value, the mixture is a lot drier. So here is the very simple value study for this painting. Now let's start to do the color version. For this one, I'll skip the drawing part because it's exactly the same. So for the first wash, I'm just going to paint the color of the light. So paint the sky first, and then I start to work out some yellow ochre to paint the color of the sunlight. So the wall, the side of the car, those are the warm light. So I just use a very transparent layer of yellow ochre to bring out the light. And I'm also painting the road right now with cobalt blue and burnt sienna. So just by using three colors, that makes my option very limited, but it also makes everything a lot simpler. So again, this is the first wash, which is just some colors. I'm not doing a big overall wash because I know this paper cannot hold a lot of water. So I'm not going to do a top to bottom big wash. I'm just going to go in with some transparent layer for the color of the light. Then I'll come back in later on my second layer to start to paint some middle value shapes. But keep it loose because the first wash is just the color of the light, and everything else after this wash is going to be darker. So you will have a chance to fix your shape and paint something a little bit more accurately with darker value later. So here I'm using my Escoda Ultimo. That's the mop brush. It holds quite a bit of paint, so I can make some bigger shape with it. If you're painting a big shape, use a bigger brush so you're not going to paint with too many brush strokes. Now the second wash. The first wash is dry, so I start with the background buildings again. I am painting the second value of it. So I keep it very simple. This is basically just one big shape, except the middle where I leave out for the light because it is hitting by the sun on the left. So I continue finishing up this shape here. Don't worry about any windows and details and things like that. This painting is very small. It's not about that. Get yourself used to mixing different colors and get used to making different washes. And one thing you're going to notice that since I only have 3 colors and they are mostly earth tone, the overall color is going to be a little bit duller. You are not going to get some vibrant, saturated color, but that is okay. If you are just getting started, get yourself used to mixing with just a few colors first and push the limit of the color that you have. And as you reach that limit, you can start to expand your color palette. So even though there's other colors on my color palette, because I want to share with you the process of just using a limited palette and my limited material, so I'm only going to use the material that I suggested in the video earlier. So I'm painting some tree colors and have that connect to the dark side of the car, and that dark side of the car connect to the cast shadow and connect it back to the tree and such. And now I am using my Escoda Perla. So as you can see, the tip is very sharp. I can go in and paint some nice detail. So this is why I only recommend this 3 brush, and they are a little bit on the larger side. Because they are all very good brushes, you can get a lot out of these brushes, which is also something you want to train yourself when you are just getting started. You want to make the most out of the brush you have. You don't want to constantly switch in brush just because you are painting a smaller shape, because when you do that, you need to remix the color, reload the brush, and try to work on it, and that will slow you down. Timing is very important for watercolor, especially now that I am using a cheaper paper. Even though I think this is a very decent paper, the paint on the paper doesn't stay wet for a very long time. So I cannot afford to keep changing brushes and remixing colors because the wash will dry and I will not be able to connect the shape as much as I want to. So I'm painting some dark shape on the top of the car just to frame out the car a little bit. So a lot of them are just purely abstract shape, especially the background. I don't need to paint out every little detail that's there. Their purpose is to help define the shape of the car and bring out their light and contrast. So now I'm starting to paint the dark value. So the back of the car, I need to have darker value there, as well as the tire. So this is the wash that I start to incorporate neutral tint into the mixture. The previous 2 washes, the light value and the middle value, I didn't really put in much neutral tint at all because I don't need that darkness just yet. So now the final wash where I paint some dark, I start to put neutral tint into the mixture, and I also keep the mixture a little bit drier. There's still a little bit of moisture just so that the paint can flow, but I keep them mostly quite dry. So it's very important to keep reloading your brush when you are feeling that your brush is running out of paint, because if you keep painting with the brush that is running out, you're going to get a lot of dry brush. Now, if that is what you want, that's great, but right now I'm still trying to connect the shape. So keep reloading your brush and mix more mixture. So I'm painting some shadows in the foreground. I want bigger shadow shape, so I'm using a bigger brush right now, just so that I can get a nice clean wash there. But you can already start to see the contrast and the light on the car. And now it's time to paint the dark trees in the background and also on the side of the car. So even though I'm painting trees, I am not mixing a green color, because if you look at the photo, there's actually not a lot of green in it. Even the green on the right in the bush, that is still not very saturated green. It's a very warm green. You can get that color very easily with yellow ochre and just a touch of cobalt blue. So for the tree, I pretty much mix all the colors with neutral tint because I just need that dark color there. And again, I'm using my Escoda Versatile. It has a fine point that I can paint some branches and the tree trunk. But at the same time, I can make bigger shapes for the group of leaves and stuff. So I'm trying to connect all the trees together, the dark trees together. And because they are darker than the background, that will push the depths a little bit more. So as opposed to copy everything on the photo, I still need to make a little bit of judgment here just to differentiate the value a little bit more. But it's a very nice little exercise. I call this exercise because this is not a finished painting, right? I'm using limited material on a cheap paper. And that's a mindset that I want you to have, especially if you are just starting to learn watercolor, is that don't obsess over a finished product. Treat everything as practice and exercise. Think of it as you are learning by doing it. That way you can have fun without a lot of stress. So the painting is almost finished. The tree dries a little bit lighter, so I come back in and push the value a little bit more. But now we do have a complete value range from light to medium to dark tone. Again, it's very important that you choose and pick a subject that is simple enough. Don't start painting a forest or a huge mountain range or even a portrait if you are not familiar with head drawing. Don't give yourself such a hard time to paint a complex scenery. Start with something simple. Even a house in a grass field is fine, as long as you are able to paint it and as long as you can learn from doing it. This is actually how I structure my course as well. I start by teaching the basic of drawing and do a very simple scenery drawing, and then we just learn the property of watercolor and do a value study of a painting, and then we paint with limited palettes. So it's a step-by-step system, and that's how I am trying to get you doing here as well. Don't give yourself 12 colors and 5 different brushes and try to paint a finished painting on a expensive paper. Treat it as an exercise and learn from every single one of it. Here are the finished painting, and now you give it a try. So all of the material I mentioned in this video are good materials I still use today. So you won't have to replace any of them unless they're out of commission. Once you feel like you reach the limitation of these materials, you can then start to expand your colors, brushes, and get bigger and better papers. Again, all of the material I mentioned are listed down below. Check them out if you want to. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this. If you find this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. You can also go to my website at cafewatercolor.com, sign up and download my Fast Track Watercolor PDF guide. I am Eric from Cafe Watercolor. See you next time.